There are people downstairs, and I don't know who they are. I don't remember why they're shouting my name. I don't remember a lot of things anymore. Please, don't forget me. Remember. I made my fortune selling some middleware I had been working on in my spare time to a growing tech company. This was back in 2002? Or was it 2003? A long time ago. I was barely in my 30s and rich beyond my wildest imagination. But you quickly realize money brings little joy when you've got no one to share it with. I had someone back then. I still remember her face. I do. I promise. She had eyes that would weep at Christmas adverts. She had hair that would turn brown at the roots when she hadn't been to the hairdresser's. She had a crooked smile that would reveal itself when she danced. She was mine. Then, she wasn't. She was killed the day after we celebrated 1-point-something million pounds arriving in our bank account. October 19th. I remember. We were rich. We were happy. Then we weren't. A snowstorm. Black ice. Car found at bottom of cliff. Her green eyes. Her dyed hair. Her crooked smile. All wiped from the earth. I remember trying to identify her body. It was near impossible. I don't remember much else. Since then, I've been trapped in this crumbling village in the middle of the Yorkshire moors. My wife and I had stumbled across it on our way to a seaside holiday. We fell in love with the rugged ruralness and bought a cottage on the outskirts. It was to be a private getaway where we'd grow old together. Now, I'm just old and alone. The last 18 years have found me drinking away my fortune. There's one pub in the village, the Steel and Oak, built in 1797. You'd be forgiven for thinking that the decor hadn't been updated since then. A cold and barren place where only the desperate would drink. I'd spend my nights with 1 or 2 alcoholics. Farmers, mostly, I think. We had nothing in common, so we kept ourselves to ourselves. Occasionally, a lost tourist would stumble into the decrepit pub. They were always on their way to somewhere nicer, most of the time, but had gotten lost or their car had broken down. I helped a few of them, I think. I remember giving lifts, as long as they didn't mind a bit of buzz driving. None of them stayed very long. Why would anyone want to spend their days with a sad drunk? As my wife would say, I think. This afternoon, a blizzard came in from the coast. The forecast said snow was going to hit the valley for at least the next 3 days. Around 3 o'clock, a young couple came blustering in from the snow. You could tell they were tourists, dressed in bright neon winter outfits that stung against the dark pub. I was going to take a few bottles home and drink myself through the storm, but the fella insisted on buying me another round. There was a desperation in his voice that made me suspect I was in the presence of a fellow alcoholic. Don't get many free drinks in this village, so gotta take them where you can. He was called John, a tall man, slim in some places, fat in others. His receding hair was partially hidden under a green bandana. She was called Jane, a pretty young thing, dressed in a yellow puffer jacket with dark hair and blonde highlights. And so the drinking began. John and Jane were happy and beautiful and polite. It made me sick. I wanted to hate them. Their joyousness made no sense in my world. But I was having an unfortunately good time. She asked if I remembered her. Something had been floating amongst the burnt remains of my brain. A flickering image. Maybe a smell. I couldn't grasp it, though. My memory has turned to dust. I've been known to forget my own name at times. Her smile faded. She said her last name was Hardwick. Family friends, I think. Must have been one of the wife's many acquaintances. She was always entertaining people, hosting weekends so friends can enjoy what she liked to call the real outdoors. Jane must have been young when my wife was obliterated at the bottom of that cliff. Jane asked if I ever redecorated the hallway. It was a phrase that stung. My wife despised the garish pink and blue flowered wallpaper and constantly demanded it get stripped away. The problem was, the room had towering high ceilings, meaning the walls stood like giant monoliths. It would have taken at least a week to strip it all, and at the time, I thought I had better things to do. John let out a sharp, harsh laugh. I changed the subject. After a few more drinks, I excused myself to go to the toilet. The urinal had been mysteriously smashed the week before, so I locked myself away in the cubicle and treated myself to a sit-down piss. Just as I was about to start, the bathroom opened, and I heard someone squeak in across the tile floor. They stopped outside the cubicle. A pair of expensive walking boots looked up at me from the gap underneath the stall. The shoes had barely got a lick of dirt on them. "That you, John?" I slurred. It was John. He didn't realize the urinal was broken. I sat in silence for 20 seconds as I tried to piss. No chance. So I surrendered the cubicle. John had been waiting so close to the door, his nose must have almost touched it. He said it was a shame that I didn't remember his wife. I agreed. It was. I had forgotten a lot of lovely things in my life, and she seemed like a lovely young lady. I told him. She was, he said. He stared at me for a moment, before sliding into the cubicle. Back at the table, Jane was staring out the window. The snow was picking up something fierce. It was being thrown around the landscape by an angry gale. Strange tunes whistled through the holes in the window frame. There was a newfound sadness on Jane's face. She asked again if I remembered her. I lied and said that I did. It was unconvincing. Her face drooped further. The blizzard pounded against the window. A pang of guilt spurred me to offer them a lift. They were staying at Oldman Farm. just a bit further out from my house. Jane gave me a wonky smile, but I could tell it wasn't real. She put her hands over mine. They felt soft and warm. Her eyes were like emeralds, dazzling in the firelight. She told me that she was sorry. "What for?" I asked, but John appeared at the table and downed the last of his pint. He said it was time to leave. The blizzard was raging when we clambered into my rusty Land Rover and left the village. I could barely see beyond the car bonnet as the white flakes whipped around us. Everything had turned into mounds of snow of varying sizes. Hills, trees, houses. Even the road signs had vanished into the whiteness, meaning I had to make my way back from memory. I made several wrong turns and had to spin the car around on the gathering ice. Julie and Jim were barely paying attention. Harsh whispers forced small clouds of fog from their mouths. The word pathetic was muttered a few times. Eventually, Jane folded her arms and stared down at her feet. The windscreen wipers were the only sound for the rest of the journey, as I watched Jeremy scowl at me through the rearview mirror. By the time we got to mine, the blizzard was screaming and pulling at the car. The rest of the journey would be downhill and treacherous even in the best of weather. There was no way Julian and Janet were getting back. I offered for them to wait it out back at mine. I had a few frozen chicken tikka masala meals and more than enough booze to tie us over. John looked ready to deny the offer, but Jane cut him off. She would love to stay, apparently. John glared out the window and told her not to waste her time through his gritted teeth. The passenger door opened and Jane silently got out. "Women, eh?" I said. John leaned his head against the glass and told me that he hated me. He would never forgive me for what I had done to Judith. "What did I do?" I asked. He told me that I don't remember. My head started to hurt. It was piercing, like a hot needle through the eye. My mouth tasted like sulfur. The rush of blood squeezed through my ears. I told him that I was sorry. He just grunted and got out of the car. I took a bottle of golden ale out from the plastic bag beneath my feet and popped it open with a twist of my car keys. 3 deep, burning gulps. And it was done. I felt better. I couldn't see John and Jane at the front door. I called out their names into the freezing void. Every shout was taken by the breeze. After a few desperate attempts of calling them, I gave up and decided to warm up inside. Maybe they would be easier to spot from the windows of the upper floor. I slid my key into the lock, but the door was already open. I've never been too fussed about home security, but I could have sworn I locked it today. Jamie and Jill were already inside, their voices barking away from the kitchen. Their argument had turned fierce. Wails bounced off the pink and blue hallway walls. Jennifer cried out that Jordan was a self-obsessed monster. Justin accused Jade of being a dirty little flirt. A plate smashed on the floor. I asked if everything was okay. Jim told me to screw off, and that I was a fat waste of space. Jill screamed at him to stop talking to me like that. I held my breath and crept upstairs. I snuck into the bathroom as the shouting continued. I clicked the lock closed and sat down on the side of the bath. John accused Jane of wanting to leave him. He was slurring. Jane asked, "Why would anyone want to spend their days with a sad drunk?" And I began to cry. I wish I could say I remembered my own name, but my mind is ash. A burnt inferno of crushed steel at the bottom of some cliff. My name is John Hardwick. My wife, Jane, was killed when her car skidded off the road and rolled down a 150-foot cliff. I was supposed to take the car to the garage and replace the worn brake pads. I went to the pub instead. I forgot to tell her. I forgot. They've stopped arguing now, but I can still hear them moving around the house. I think they're looking for me. Stop crying, Jane. I remember now. I remember.